How's everyone doing? Thanks for joining me on my small engine repair channel. Hopefully everyone is enjoying their holidays. Today's project is a Troy-Bilt Extreme Auger 24-inch two-stage four-stroke snowblower. It belongs to one of my neighbors, and the problem he's having with it is apparently it smokes when he starts it up, and then after it runs for about 10 minutes or so, it kind of wants to die. It doesn't necessarily die, but it sounds like it wants to die, like it's running out of gas. So let's take a look at it for him and see if we can't fix it up. Alright guys, so first thing I'm going to do is just try and replicate the problem. So I'm going to just do a quick once over here on this thing, and we're going to take a look and see what we're dealing with. So fuel definitely is almost full. He did say that he pulled it out. He did run it to do his driveway one time, and then it started to run real rough. All right, so the oil looks like it's overfilled, and it looks like it's really thin. Let's see here. Yeah, that's definitely, I mean, you're supposed to use a little thinner oil in the cold Canadian winters, so 5W30 instead of 10W30, but this seems like it's almost mixed with some gasoline. If I smell, yeah, it's definitely got some gasoline mixed in there. I'm going to wipe this off and get an accurate reading as to how much is in here. Okay, so I wiped the dipstick nice and clean. I'm going to just stick that in there. Let's see if we can get a more accurate reading of the dipstick here. Yeah, so definitely overfilled. And what I suspect is there is a little bit of fuel mixed in with this oil because it's so thin looking. Definitely smells like there's some fuel in there. I also notice it's kind of wet all around the oil dipstick here. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to run it, see if I can replicate the problem. I do believe that it's probably going to smoke when I first start it up, just like he says, because I mean it's definitely overfilled, so there's probably some potential for some being in the cylinder at this point. It does look a little bit wet down here as well. So anyways, I'm going to go ahead and try this out. Alright, so I got on full choke, I got the throttle up. I definitely hear some primer working, the key's in. So I got the electric start hooked up. Let's see what happens here. Alright, so it did smoke quite a bit when I first started up there. Part of that is because of the choke being on. I did turn the choke off, and it did kind of sputter and run a little bit rough. Now it seems to be running pretty good. I function test everything else. Everything seems to be working okay. I think what I'm going to do is I don't want to let it run too long with that really thin oil, just because well, it's overfilled first of all, but second of all, it's not good for the engine to have that thin oil in there with the fuel. So I think I'm going to shut it off here, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to dive into the carburetor a little bit. Alright guys, so since I'm going to do a full service on this anyways, I think what I'm going to do before I get into the carburetor is I'm going to go ahead and pull the oil out of this thing. So I've got it propped up just a little bit. I don't think that's going to clear, so I'm just going to put this guy here, try and direct the oil. Otherwise, just pull this plug out, it's just going to drip down along this pan. The tube, they didn't make it long enough, so put this little this little yogurt container that I put a hole in at the bottom, try and direct the oil where I want it to go. Whoa, well, that's a big mess. Yeah, I know the oil is a little bit warm, but this is just mostly gas. A lot of gas. That is super thin. Definitely smells like gas. Alright, so I've got the oil plug back in. I haven't put any fresh oil in it as of yet, but I'm going to try and get access to this carburetor next. So you have to get this choke knob off, and usually you just kind of pry it. There you go. And then there is, get this panel off, of course there's these two screws. It looks like I take the throttle control knob off. Alright, get these two 10 mils off. And yeah, it looks like I'm gonna have to get this side ones off here. And there are two more 10 mils on the side here, which I'm going to have to access with a wrench. Alright. Of course, there's one more, looks like here on the front. So next thing you're going to want to do is remove these two Phillips screws for the starter. You need to get access behind that. So once you get it out this far, a couple things you're going to have to remove. There's a couple of electrical connections for the key. Just pull those guys off. It's kind of hard to do with one hand, but you get the idea. And you're also going to have to pull off this primer line right here, coming to the back of the primer bulb. This guy right there, okay? And primer bulb is off. Both of those slide kind of right through this groove right here underneath where this bolt goes. But if we can leave those all connected, let's move this whole panel out of the way. That's what we're going to end up doing. So this primer line is connected on the other end here. I think I'm just going to take that off this end, and I'm just going to move all this off to the side. And now we have access to our carburetor. Now one of these sleeves has come out of this area here. Alright, so first thing you gotta do is take off this paper gasket. And then this choke mechanism just comes out of this hole here. Okay. So I think what I'll do is, just so I can keep straight how this goes, because it goes just like so, I'm going to try and take it out from the other end, which is just a 90-degree Z-bend, and I'll put this guy back in here like this. And then the next one is another paper gasket. And then we have access to this carburetor. First thing we gotta do is take the fuel line off, and then so we gotta get the fuel line off here, and then we gotta get off this linkage. There's a spring, a little sort of return spring or tension spring that you can just pull out of the hole here. Usually you just don't want to bend it too far, but you bend it down a little bit and that just pulls it out. And then with this throttle rod here, you got to pull the carburetor out a little bit and then just pull up on that rod. And now we just got to get the fuel off, fuel line off, and then the carburetor will come right off. So I'll just clamp off the fuel line here so I don't spill too much fuel. Try and put something under here just to catch some of this fuel if I can. Just remove the clamp. And I use my fuel clamp removal tool, or fuel line removal tool. If you guys want a link to the video where I made one of these for myself, you can click on the link there now on the top right. And then you just get it off, just like so. And now our carburetor is ready to come off. There we go. We'll take it up to the bench now, and we'll get into this carburetor, see what's going on. So overall, the outside of this is fairly clean. I'm not too worried about that. what we're gonna do is a pressure test on this guy to see if the needle and seat is actually making a good connection. Before I can do that, I should probably try and drain out all the fuel from the float bowl. So it's just a 10 mil bolt for the bowl nut. And I'm trying to capture as much of the fuel as I can that's in this carburetor just to kind of see the quality of it, and it actually looks pretty good actually. And it smells fresh. It doesn't smell like last year's gas even. Alright, so now what we're going to do is do a pressure test on this carburetor. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hook up my pressure tester here to the inlet, fuel inlet. And with the float in this position, the needle valve should be closed and should be sealed off. This would be in the open position. That's the closed position. So it actually seems like it's in pretty good. It's staying steady here around 7 psi, which is pretty good. So I'm not sure why there's a whole bunch of fuel in the oil, unless this is an intermittent problem where it's intermittently not sealing, making a good seal where this needle valve goes. So here's the needle valve. It's hooked to this float, right? When it's upside down like this, this needle valve is actually in the open position, and as the fuel fills up in the bowl, it actually causes this float to move up, and it actually shuts off the fuel. Then when it needs more fuel in the bowl, it opens it up. So it's constantly kind of shutting off and opening the fuel. So what we're going to do is, because I know that there's at least an intermittent issue, we're going to go ahead and just service this carburetor and clean it. So I've taken out the float pin. I'll take out the float itself. Now, another cause for it to be flooding like this could be that the float is actually not floating because it has a crack or a leak in it and it's filled up with fuel. So to check for that, you would just go ahead and shake that. If you hear anything, then that's not good. Now, I know this gentleman does take care of his machines. He says he runs them out of fuel every year before he stores them, which is exactly what I recommend. I don't see any deformation really on that needle valve, so it doesn't look like it's bad. What I'm going to do is I'll take this O-ring out. Put that guy over there. Next, we want to take out the main jet and the emulsion tube, which is down in here. You get yourself a flathead screwdriver because it's a flathead, and push down as you're turning. Try and get this to loosen off because you don't want to strip the flathead of the main jet. Now this main jet looks clear, so I'm not seeing any signs of any issues at this point with this carburetor. But once again, and And then there's an emulsion tube down in here as well. Again, because of lighting, you can't really see that, but sometimes they don't want to come out. So what you might have to do is try and get it out from the top side. This one looks like it's partially out, because in the throat of the carburetor you would see that the head of that emulsion tube come up, but I don't see it. So I think what I'm going to do is try and help it out. I get myself a little Allen wrench, and from one side or the other you have to push down from the top side of this emulsion tube and it pops right out. Okay, so this emulsion tube changes the fuel to a sort of a mist or vapor almost, and it has a bunch of small holes there. Those all have to be clear, and those ones actually, again, look really good. Now, I have an ultrasonic cleaner, so that's how I'll be cleaning this carburetor today. But if you don't, just spray some carb spray through all these little holes in the emulsion tube and the main jet. The last thing we got to take care of is the idle circuit. So there is a idle set screw that we need to get out, and again, a flat head. I mean, it looks like a half moon. I don't know if you can see that. On this one, it's a half moon. Sometimes it's actually a Phillips. So you just find a flat head that's big enough to kind of pull that idle screw out. And again, it's plastic, so it doesn't need to be cleaned. And then under here is where your idle circuit is. So just stick a flat head up and underneath there. And if you get a lot of surging, this is typically the culprit, because there is a very, very small hole in the end of this idle jet. So what you need to do is get yourself a little piece of wire from a wire brush, or from a wire wheel. Make sure it's clean, and then you stick it through there. And again, this one is actually in really good shape. So I'm not seeing any. I will put this one in the ultrasonic cleaner just because it has a little brass jet. So I'm not really seeing any signs of why this thing is running rich. I think the other thing I'll do is I'll take sometimes what happens is you get buildup on the seat part, and really kind of the only way to clean that out is if you got some like brass polish or something like that, you can stick it on a Q-tip and run that in and out, or get yourself these little pipe cleaner type deals and find one that fits in there, and then just try and run that in and out, and put some carb spray in there. But again, this one does not look like it's in bad shape, so it's got me a little bit stumped as to why it's leaking oil, fuel into the oil. So hopefully, just by servicing this thing, it's gonna fix our issue. Now, again, if you don't have an ultrasonic cleaner, what you're gonna want to do is there's a couple of holes in here that I like to kind of poke through. One for your idle jet here, your idle circuit comes through where the idle jet goes. So I kind of poke that, and then this other guy here as well. and then spray these with some carb spray. And that's about it. So I'm going to put these in my ultrasonic cleaner for all these parts in my ultrasonic cleaner for about 15 minutes, and we'll put it back together, put it back on the machine, see what happens. So take a look at the end of this spark plug. This thing is pretty sooted. There's lots of black soot on the end of this. It should be a nice sort of a mocha color. And this thing is filled with soot. So definitely was running on the rich side. So to service this, all I'm going to do is clean this up on my wire wheel. I'll re-gap it and make sure it's set to 30 thousandths of an inch, and then we'll go ahead and reinstall that guy. Alright, so we're ready to test it out. Keys in, throttles up. Choke is on. And let's give her a whirl. So it's running good right now. I'm going to let it run here for probably 20 minutes. And we'll come back, revisit in 20 minutes to see how it's doing. Alright guys, so there you go. Just a tune-up and a carb clean, and this thing's been running for 15, maybe 20 minutes now, so I don't see any issues with it now, and hopefully the carb clean did the job, and she's ready to go. So hopefully this helps somebody out if you're having the issues that this gentleman was having, which again were it would blow lots of white smoke when you first started it up, and then after it ran for 15-20 minutes it would start to sort of bog down, like surge every 20 seconds or so, like it wanted to die, and then it would come back to life. So anyways guys, this is the end of this project. Until our next project, take care.